Sereno City Council on June 30th, 2020 is now called to order.
Thank you, Mayor. Prior to our roll call, we need to make a special announcement. Council members, staff, and meeting participants, thank you for joining us this evening for the June 30th, 2020 Monte Sereno special council meeting. I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes, that this City Council meeting is being conducted pursuant to provisions of the Brown Act and a recent executive order issued by Governor Newsom to facilitate teleconferencing to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. The Brown Act sets strict rules for teleconferencing. It requires that each teleconference location be identified in the office and agenda, that it be accessible to the public, that members of the public be allowed to address the council from that location, that the agenda be posted at that location, that at least one member be here in the council chambers, and that at least a quorum of the council be participating from within Monte Sereno. The governor's executive order has suspended those rules. The executive order does require that we continue to notice meetings in advance and that we provide members of the public an opportunity to offer public comment. Before the meeting is called to order, I'd like to point out a few things to assist council members, staff, and members of the public to successfully participate in this meeting. Council members, please keep your microphones muted until you wish to speak. You have a hot mic. For this council meeting, we are using Zoom to host the council meeting. At the bottom of the Zoom client, there are two icons, chat and raise hand. Please use chat only to report technical issues such as being unable to hear a council member speaking. Please use the raise hand if you would like to be recognized and enabled to speak to the council by the mayor. For the public to comment under oral communications or on any agenda item, emails can be submitted to the city clerk, limited to 350 words, and they will be read into the record. This limit is set to adhere to the typical 3-minute allowance. Only attendees using the Zoom application can use the raise hand option to comment. Participation from a telephone will allow for listening only and does not allow for any feedback. And finally, because we are not all in the same room, all votes at this meeting will be taken by a roll call. So we're ready for the roll call. Councilmember LeBouvet.
Here.
Councilmember Turner.
Here.
Councilmember Elahi.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Leuthold.
Present.
Mayor and Chair Lawler.
Present. All right, thank you, Mr. Leonardis. Are there any changes to the orders of the day? All right, seeing none. Oral communications. Mr. Leonardis, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on items not on the agenda? If so, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, we will move on to written communications. Do we have any written communications?
We have none, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. Are there any council members wishing to speak on or pull an item from the consent calendar? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Ms. Krupp, did you have an item to speak about that's not on the agenda?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
All right. All right, let's go back to consent calendar, please. Councilmember Turner.
Yes. Yes, I would like to remove number 2, setting fiscal year 2021 appropriations limit. And I wanted to find out if I could ask the question of our city manager or a fiscal manager, financial manager.
Okay. Any other items that we need to pull at this time? Councilmember LaBouvet?
Can we pull item 3, 4, and
and 5. I think we need to, yeah, there's a couple of changes that we talked about previously that I want to get in, but we can't do that on the consent calendar. So if we can pull all of those items, and probably we could take number 3 last, since that one is the one that adopts everything. So we should talk about 4 and 5 first, and then come back to 3.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Then at this time, do we have a motion to approve item 1 on the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion.
All right. Thank you. And we have a second.
Motion to approve.
All right.
Yeah.
Item 1.
I'll second.
We have a second by Councilmember Labouvet. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember LeBouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Luthold,
Yes.
Mayor and Chair Lawler.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
All right. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 2 then. Councilmember Turner, do you want to?
Yes, I'd like to understand why the proposed budget for 2020-21 is $5,983,000. What I show is $5,200,000. I don't have the exact figure. Can you explain that, please, City Manager or our Finance Manager?
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Turner. I would like to have our interim finance manager, Reynold Samaranos, offer the explanation.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, but there's feedback.
Okay. I'm looking at the figures. Sorry about that. I don't know how to stop that. Yeah, the figure should be a total appropriations of $5,260,000.
Reynold, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Get back to that screen that you're looking at. Yeah, the total appropriation should be $5,269,000.
5,269,
Yeah, $5,269,339,000.
339.
Yeah, $5,269,339. I don't know how to get that feedback out.
Is your phone close to your computer by any chance?
Yes.
That might be it.
Or if you have somebody else close to you that's on the panel, on this discussion, they may need to mute.
All right, then, so we can make that adjustment and then approve. We can have a motion to approve item 2 with the adjustment to the correct appropriations amount of $5,269,339. Is that correct?
That's the correct amount.
This is Sergio. I just might sort of chime in on the purpose of this resolution. This resolution sets the GAN limit for the city, which is basically the maximum limit of tax revenues that the city can expend. Basically, the way the GAN limit works is you typically want to set that limit as high as might be necessary, and typically higher than, for most cities, it's higher than the budget, because the way the GAN limit works is that if you exceed the GAN limit, you basically can't appropriate or spend tax revenues in excess of what you've adopted as your GAN limit. So this discussion in the staff report of what the proposed budget is for fiscal year 2020 to 2021, that's not actually part of the resolution or what the action is that the city council is doing under item 2. So we would want to confirm that the right budget numbers are in the actual resolution for item 6. But for this resolution, the big thing for the council to be concerned about is that actual appropriations limit.
Okay, so
sorry,
we need to discuss
yes,
whether or
he's
not,
correct.
okay. So then we can approve it as is, or do we need to discuss whether or not we're comfortable with $7 million?
Yes, that is the correct amount, Mayor.
Okay, all right. Then does that answer your question, Councilmember Turner?
What I'd like to do, if at all possible, is to actually vote on this after we talk about item 6. Then we okay what the budget's going to be, and then we can put the exact amount in there.
Okay, Councilmember LaBouvet?
So in looking at the resolution, the actual budget number is not in here at all in the resolution. It's just adopting the 7 million amount. So I'm wondering, so how do this is, I'm not familiar with this law. So does the way the appropriation works is that this is setting a ceiling and then the budget basically overrides. So it's the lesser of the two amounts, or this becomes, the appropriation that is possible, and then so what takes precedent here if you have a budget and this?
So the GAN limit sets a maximum ceiling on the city's expenditures of revenues that are the proceeds of taxes. And it is a cap that is imposed by the state constitution. And the state constitution provides a formula by which the city can increase that cap every year. So typically you want to be increasing that cap every year as allowed by state law. It doesn't actually authorize any spending. It's just something that is a figure the city is supposed to keep track of, and the city can't exceed that cap when it is authorizing the budget. So that is the main purpose of the GAN limit. So this does not actually set the budget or authorize any particular spending. This just announces what the city's total cap is on expenditure of tax proceeds. So it's an action the city's supposed to do by law every year.
Okay, then, do we have any other comments, or can we go ahead and make a motion to pass then?
I'll move to pass it.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, Mr. Leonardis?
Councilmember LaBouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leuthold,
Yes.
Mayor and Chair Lawler.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to Councilmember LaBouvet, you wanted to speak to items 4 and 5. Is that correct?
Yes. So we were trading some emails, and there were a couple of things that didn't get into the MOU and the labor handbook, and so I just wanted to revisit those items and whether we can adopt those. So what I noticed a typo in the MOU in section 11.3.2. So maybe we just take these. I have 2 items basically, and we can take them one at a time. So 11.3.2, it looked like a typo to me. I didn't really know what this number was supposed to be. Maybe Mr. City Manager, you can help us out with that one.
Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Councilmember LaBouvet. I'd like to ask Ms. Donna Williamson if she could answer to this question that you have presented. Our labor attorney.
Yes. Can you hear me? This
Yeah.
is Donna Williamson.
Yes, hi.
Hi, thank you, Council. 11. I did send an email back. 11.3.2 is a typo, and that should be 60 hours, which is the current level. I have no idea how the number got skewed, but it is 60, and that is what the parties agreed to, and it has been corrected for publication should council adopt this.
Okay, and the second question that I had was section 18.2, the vacation accrual table. I think when we previously discussed this, that this was not a negotiated item, and so it should reflect the existing municipal code resolution. And so by converting it to months, it was not correct. And so I would suggest we either put it back to years the way the resolution is stated, or correctly convert it to months.
So I would respond by saying that the chart is correct. The breakdown in the years in the resolution that was previously passed by council did not address, other than that it accrued monthly by hours. The chart did not contain the monthly hourly accrual. And because there wasn't clear language in the resolution that was passed by council on that, we went back after our last meeting with council to resolve the question of whether there was a change. And we looked to the past practice of the city and how those vacation hours accrue. And they do accrue beginning with the start of the 5th year at the higher level monthly, although the increase to the 15 days doesn't actually fully accrue until the end of that 5th year. So this was adjusted to match what your past practice is. It is clearer to do it with a monthly accrual, which is also what your resolution called for. And this is not a change other than the addition for the 25 days per year for employees who have been employed over 20 years or 20 years and over, which was authorized by council as part of this negotiated agreement.
So I don't agree with that math. So the 15 days per year starts at month 49, and month 49 is 1 month more than 4 years. It's supposed to start at 5 years, which is 60 months. So I don't agree with that math.
Right, but that is never how the city has implemented. There's no language that says whether it starts with the start of the 5th year or the end of the 5th year. I would also say that the way most places do it is how your city is doing it, which is at the start of the 5th year, you begin to accrue the higher level. And that has been the city's consistent past practice. So legally, that is what the status quo is in the city. And if you were to change that, you would be taking vacation away from your employees.
So you keep saying start of the 5th year, but you have that you start to accrue 8.75 hours per month at month 49. That is not 5 years.
Correct. That's the first month of the start of the 5th year. That is what your past practice is. So we are bound by law if there's an ambiguity to follow what your past practice is. Council's direction, as I understood it, was to maintain status quo except for the additional bracket of 20 plus years. This is what your status quo is. It was not as clearly explained in the previous charts, but this is not a change to what your city has been doing since the resolution was enacted. I forgot what year, but several years ago. So it would be a reduction of compensation for your current city employees to change that.
So can you acknowledge that 49 months is not 5 years? And in the resolution, it states that you start this next higher accrual tier at 5 years, which is 60 months. So, I mean, even if the city was doing it wrong, it's not per the resolution, right? So that would be a mistake. And I'm sorry that there was a mistake there, but you know, the math is pretty clear to me. Maybe somebody else has a different opinion and can say that I'm wrong, but 49 months is not 5 years. And that's what the resolution says for that next tier and so on.
If I may, I believe, Ms. Williamson, you said that the actual accrual doesn't happen until the end of that 5th year, correct?
The increased accrual rate that goes from 10 years to 15 years
For 10 days to 15 days.
You begin to accrue it when you have completed 4 years. And when you've completed 4 years, you're in your 49th month, and you move up to the 8.75 hours, and you accrue monthly additional hours until in your last month of your 5th year, you finally achieve the 15 days. And that is how the city has done it, and that is very common as far as these charts go. And so we did go back following council's question on that to look at what the payroll records are on how it's been done. I do not identify that as a mistake. It is a normal way that these kinds of benefits are implemented, and it is also status quo, which would mean it would be a pay reduction to change it. And so that's why we adjusted it to clearly reflect that.
Okay. Any other council member questions on item 5? Or is this item 4? Oh, Councilmember Elahi, yes.
Thank you. I guess it's a discussion that would clarify things. So I think what we're saying now is the policy is going to be the hours are starting to accrue after on the 49th month and so on. And my question is, since this seems to be our existing policy, there are already staff and employee who may have accrued at this rate currently. And if you change that, then we really could change that, because if they're legally entitled to have those accruals done, then that's already a fait accompli. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, so I did pull up the resolution. The resolution very clearly says years of service 5 to 9 is when you start to accrue 15 days of vacation leave. And it says
That's correct, but it does not identify whether it's the start or the finish of the 5th year is where the ambiguity is, unfortunately.
Councilmember Luthold, or Mayor Pro Tem Luthold?
Yeah, I think this is a common thing that we run into all the time. And let me just try to clarify a little bit. Year 1 begins with month 0. So year 5 begins with month 49. You've been there 4 years, you're now beginning the next year, which is your 5th year. So yes, in normal human terms, there's ambiguity, but it's read to read after 5 years means at the beginning of your 5th year. Just like if somebody said in your 1st year or for your 1st year. If you said after 1 year, yeah, you might think that started on the 13th month and you got nothing in year 1, but obviously that's not logical. So that's why I think these things are being read this way, which is if somebody says your 1st year, we're referring to month 0 to month 12, month 11, month 12. So this is a pretty normal interpretation. It's how it's been interpreted. And so we're bound by that. We're not going to be able to change it. But I certainly understand the reasoning. It just doesn't work that way.
All right, thank you. Sorry about my dog growling. So then should we move on to item 5? And I was thinking maybe we can approve 3, 4, and 5 all together once we address everything that we need to address. Is that fair?
you should. Yeah. All right. So maybe I'm just dense here, but how can you have 5 years of service until you have 5 years of service? So you're at 4.999, it's still 4 years of service.
Mayor, if I can add some input into this
Thank you, Steve.
response from Councilmember Leboeuf. So this was, difficult to understand. We went back and as Ms. Williamson said, we looked at the past practice. We actually had to make a call into Sue LaHaro, and Ms. Hamilton had made that call as well to verify the past practice. But beginning at month 49, you get fractional days, so to speak. You just accrue the hours or the days fractionally. So if it's month 50, and then you wouldn't have the full 15 days at that point. You would only accrue between 48 on the 49th to the 50th month in that vacation time, and it accrues up to the 15 by year 5. Is that a more, Ms. Williamson, is that sort of another way of explaining it?
Yes, I think in 2006, when the resolution was passed, it didn't identify whether you get 15 days per year at the beginning of your 5th year or the end, and you don't get 15 days per year until the end of your 5th year, but you do incrementally begin to accrue up to that cap starting with your 5th year. And that is how it's been done since 2006, and that is how it is commonly done.
All right, thank you. So are we good? Should we, Mr. Leonardis, from a procedural standpoint, should I make a motion to approve item 4 and then move on to item 5, or should we try to do 3, 4, and 5 all at once?
I would recommend, since there are 3 separate resolutions, and it sounds like we might be introducing some changes to each item, that
we'll do them one at a time?
we do them one at a time, yes.
Okay.
And Mayor, I don't know if there are any members of the public who wish to speak, but each one of these should be handled as such. If you have to call the public and then close the public hearing.
All right, then I will, if there aren't any other council member questions at this time, I will open it to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Please raise your hand.
Liz, there was still, I think Councilmember Turner had a couple of items that I saw through email that we might have to adopt.
I believe those are on item 5.
Oh, those are on item 5, sorry. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, I'll accept the explanation for the other one. So it's just the typo that we might have to change.
Okay, great. All right, seeing that there are no members of the public wishing to speak on this item, I'll return it back to council. Do we have a motion to adopt the memorandum of understanding with the Association of City Employees with the typographical change for 11.3.2 from 6,040 hours to 60 hours?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Leonardis, roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember LeBavet.
Yes.
Councilmember Turner. Councilmember Turner.
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Luthold.
Yes.
Mayor Lawler.
Yes.
Right, passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 5, adoption of personnel handbook. Council member questions? I believe Councilmember Turner, you had some.
Yes, so before we met this afternoon, about half an hour before we started to meet, I brought 3 comments on the personnel handbook, and I think it has been resolved. I just wanted to make sure that they will actually go in the final publishment of this document.
Okay.
And Mayor Lawler, I believe Mr. Rudin had worked with Ms. Williamson to clean up some of the language on the suggested changes that were made by Councilmember Turner.
Yes, so Councilmember Turner reached out to Steve and I regarding a couple of typographic errors in the personnel handbook on page 25, section 701.1.3. There's a sentence that should be corrected to read, if the cost of elected benefits is less than the amount of the allowance, the employee may, that would be the correction, elect. On page 50, 1101.1, point 16, that should be corrected to read falsifying or tampering with any city record, including work time or financial records or audio or video recordings. And then on page 59, section 1301.4, employee access to personnel file, that should have a new subparagraph E that basically explains legal restrictions, and it should state, unless required by law, personnel files may not be inspected or accessed except as authorized by this policy or by the city manager for official city business. So those are the changes that are suggested.
All right, thank you. Any other council member questions? Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll take it back to council. Do I have a motion to approve the adoption of the personnel?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Councilmember Elahi, do I have a second?
Yeah, the motion is by Dan Leboe. Yeah, I'll second it.
Yep, with the suggested changes. Yep. All right. Mr. Leonardis, roll call vote, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Leboe.
Yes.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leuthold.
Yes.
Mayor Lawler.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right. Going back to item number 3 then, which was dependent upon 4 and 5. Adoption of resolution governing employee-employer relations. Councilmember Labouvet.
Yeah, I think this is actually kind of a really significant moment for the city. I'd like to make a statement. In response to what I felt was unsubstantiated criticism about city employee turnover, I made a statement last December in the Mercury News editorial that I thought it was a good idea for city employees to unionize. I said that Monte Sereno is not large enough to have a full-time human resources, so a union might help to improve their representation and work environment. I think the current agreement is good for the city employees and good for the residents of Monte Sereno. Existing employees negotiated hard, did not concede any benefits, and enhanced their salary with a front-loaded 3.17 per year increase over the next 3 years, in addition to eligibility for 5% annual increases for just satisfactory performance. With the MOU, the employee handbook, we now have a formal framework for mutually defined employment expectations and resolving differences. Mr. Leonardis and the labor negotiation team have done an excellent job of putting in place best-in-class human resource processes and have improved Monte Sereno's long-term financial stability. Future employees are now better aligned with other public sector compensation packages by eliminating city payment of employee share of pension costs, reducing lifetime medical benefits to legal minimums, eliminating the additional week of administrative personnel leave, eliminating and reducing the $300 per month car allowance, and eliminating the $700 a month fringe benefit cash out deferred compensation. In addition, Monte Sereno will pay off over $700,000 in pension obligations if we vote on that tonight on behalf of city employees this year. In an economic environment where other cities are running deficits and laying off employees, Monte Sereno employees have not been effective whatsoever. In fact, only conceded future employee benefits rather than take an approach of a shared common interest. I think the previous criticism of the City Council with respect to employees' relation is unfounded. The City Council has fiduciary responsibility for diligent oversight and sustained city finances. As we will discuss further when we get to the budget topic, in a down year such as 2020, less than a 5% negative deviation in recurring revenue or expenses will create a structural deficit. I think the current City Council and City Manager have served the residents and city employees well with recent updates to our mission statement, financial policies, strategic planning, employee MOU and handbook, enhanced budget reporting, scrutiny and reduction of operating expenses, and the 5-year capital improvement project forecast. I want to thank Mr. Leonardis again for all of the significant accomplishments in the last 6 months. Really big thank you. Thanks a lot.
That's great. Thank you, Councilmember Labouvet. Do we have a motion to approve?
We
Mayor,
need public comment, I think, before we do that. Or did you already get public comment?
Oh, maybe I didn't do that. I'm sorry. Yes, Council. Yes, Mr. Leonardis, is that what you were going to say?
that is correct.
Okay, thanks. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this at this time? Seeing none, I will take it back to council. And we have a motion by Councilmember LaBouvet. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mayor Pro Tem Luthold, was that supposed to be a second, or did you have something to say?
Oh, I was going to second, but Ms. Turner beat me to it.
Beat you to it. Okay. Mr. Leonardis, roll call, please. Well,
Yes, Mayor. And I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Williamson and the council, and of course, the Association of Monte Sereno employees for all their efforts in bringing this to fruition. And we will call the roll call vote. Councilmember LaBouvet.
I just wanted to put in my comment before we call that, if you don't mind.
sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with Councilmember LeBouet. I think this is always having a union for an employer is something that most employers don't want. But I think in our case, this is a great city, and we have good staff and good employees who work very, very hard. And they've shown that by the way they've approached it, the coming to an understanding with the city on this contract. And even though it's unusual for a city this small to have a union, we welcome the union, and we look forward to being able to work through any issues that may come up through the representatives that they have and through those we have. And I think the union representatives, our city planner and our city engineer work well. And I'm also thankful to our labor negotiator, Donna Williamson, for all the effort she put in to get this thing done. And it's been done amicably, and that's how the city should work. We don't need to be on each other's throats because we disagree on some issues. So we have to work together. And if we can keep our employees happy, they'll do their best for our citizens also. So thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. I think we can all voice the same sentiments. Mr. Leonardis, go ahead with the roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember LeBouvet.
Yes.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Luthold.
Yes.
Mayor Lawler.
Yes.
Right, passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, moving on to public hearings. Item number 6, fiscal year 2020-2021 annual budget. Mr. Leonardis, do you have a report?
Yes, I have a report this evening, Mayor, and thank you. We are very excited to present the fiscal year 2021 budget. Council has worked very hard along with staff to make this presentation this evening in the new format, which is a departure from our past formats of our budget presentation. We have utilized the ClearGov functionality to make this budget a more transparent and interactive budget when posted online. We've tried to make it such that it contains not only numbers, but an extensive narrative, as well as give the feel and look of an annual report for somebody who would first come into Monte Sereno and want to know about our city. This document is really kind of gives an overview of a lot of things, and that's what we wanted it to do. If someone, their first impression of the city was to look at the budget, they would hopefully get much more information than just a bunch of numbers, and they could look at that, and it would leave them with a greater understanding of us as a community. We are here, I sent the budget out early last week. We received feedback from a couple council members on a couple corrections, as well as some suggestions to the printed version of the budget to make it more readable. And I responded this afternoon, and I sent over kind of a summary of those changes that were incorporated with the latest online version of the budget, not the one that's posted in this agenda, but it's overall the same, just more readable. And there was one word that was changed. Efficacy was changed to efficiency, which both words work in the same kind of context. So we have made some corrections, and we're looking forward to council's input and discussion this evening. I have on the line with us our staff, including interim finance manager, Mr. Reynold Samaranos, and I have our engineer, Jessica Kahn, excuse me, who also prepared figures on the capital improvement portion of our budget. And we are open for your questions. This concludes the staff presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Leonardis. Okay, council member questions. Who would like to go first? Councilmember Labouvet.
This isn't really a question, but I just wanted to sort of point out that I really appreciate all of the work that Mr. Samaranos has done on this budget, and I really like the new format. For me, it's actually much more readable in that in the previous years, if you looked at the revenue stream, it usually adds back in whatever you take out of savings. And so it's very hard to tell what your deficits are. And so the way this budget is sort of is displayed is that, you know, we have basically recurring, and if we also kind of look back to the financial policy, you know, we have to look at recurring revenue and recurring expenses differently than we look at the capital side. And so he has created a separate column for each. So if we look at our recurring revenues and then we subtract off our recurring expenses, this is a very important number. To me, it's like the most important number in this whole document, which is on page 33 at the bottom, column 2, which is $162,000 approximately, $163,000. This is, for me, this is the operating margin. This is basically the income that the city gets beyond all of its expenses. So once we've paid all of our recurring operating expenses, this is our recurring margin or our recurring operating income. And this is what we get to spend on roads and capital projects and so forth. So this is a really down year. You know, I went looking at previous budgets, and the best I could read off those previous budgets is our operating margin varies somewhere between 200K and maybe even 800K in a really good year. But just to sort of put in context this budget, you know, it doesn't take a lot of operating expense increases to exceed 160K, right? That's only 3 times 50K, you know, or something of that nature. And then we're in deficit range, right? And so, and once you get into deficit range, then our financial policy also requires us to look at action plans and perhaps headcount reductions and those sorts of things. So, so for those that maybe haven't looked at this budget in a lot of detail, I would really kind of focus your attention on that operating margin number of $163,000, and basically that really is allows us to really start a discussion around what we should do going forward. Thank you.
All right, any other council member comments or questions at this time? Council member Elahi?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the work the city's put in on it, and Councilmember Lebouver's work on it has made it easier for the rest of us to understand what's going on in here, and thank you for that. One concern I've had is whether we properly accounted for potential litigation that may be coming down the pipeline. I mean, we've gone through a couple of cases. Is there any provision in the budget for litigation? And if Mr. Rudin can kind of give us some estimate as to what would be an appropriate number for us to budget for that, for any litigation that may come up, that may be helpful and maybe something we need to consider.
You know, I think potentially there's a couple of cases that have been discussed. Steve, perhaps you can answer whether there is anything in the current budget whatsoever for litigation. For one of the cases, I anticipate that it might be, you know, considerably less expensive. I think a conservative estimate, you know, at this point would probably be putting somewhere between $125,000 and $250,000 in the budget for litigation purposes, assuming that cases are not litigated fully to conclusion. And I will separately send the council an update on that analysis.
Understood. Thank you. And I'm trying to figure out whether when we approve some of these resolutions, we can have a paragraph in there requiring either the applicant, if the resolution is in their favor, or one of the objecting parties agree to indemnify and hold the city harmless from potential litigation, whether that's possible.
So in general, the city can require indemnity as a condition of approval for most land use projects. The city's actual application forms have been updated to require an agreement by the applicant to indemnify the city relating to any approval of the project. So I know that that is something the city is requiring now for new development applications. In general, though, it's, if the city denies a project, it's, you can't require the applicant to indemnify the city over the denial of that applicant's project. So,
and I guess you can't require the main opponent to do that either.
in general, no. For members of the public or opponents of a particular project who want to bring something like a CEQA challenge, there is really no way to require an outside party that has nothing to do with the, that is not a proponent of the applicant to, indemnify the city from claims by the applicant over a denial.
Thank you. So I guess my next question to the finance person is, do we need to budget that litigation potential expenses of $125,000 to $250,000 somewhere in the budget?
That needs to be added because our retainer is set at 108,000. So the difference is the amount attributed to legal expense. So we need to add some dollars there.
Okay.
Sorry, Councilmember Lundgren, and then Councilmember Turner.
So for me, where I would look is, this is on page 73. There's basically an accounting of fund balances. And what we're allowed to do, or actually what we're required to do, is with our undesignated reserves, we can put designations against those reserves. So for example, we have historically had an economic fluctuation reserve, which is really our extreme emergency reserve for the city finances, and we keep that at $3.5 million. We also have a capital improvement program reserve of $500K here. So, as we get into the discussion, what we could do is maybe take the $500K that's existing here for capital improvement and split that and make a legal reserve also. The challenge, and this is when I talk with my insurance broker, is that, hey, you don't want to have too big of a reserve for legal stuff. Otherwise, people will kind of come after you and maybe, challenge you because you're going to, burn through those reserves. But I mean, that's something that we could do. We could basically make a designation in the unrestricted reserve amount. And if you look at the total of that fund, it's over $4 million. And then there's also money just sitting in sort of the savings account of another almost $500,000, right? And so, you have $4.4 million sitting that could be allocated to whatever the council wanted to allocate it to. So there is plenty of money, but if Councilmember Elahi, feels more comfortable with actually putting a designation against it, I think that's the place where we would do it.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think that's an excellent suggestion. As long as we're doing unrestricted funds, because I don't know how many of these are restricted and how many are not, but it'd be good to have a number there.
Councilmember Turner? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Councilmember Turner.
Yes, I wanted to go over to page 71, the expenditure account detail. If you look at that page where we have salary and benefits, it's actually fully loaded. It's $1,027,545. And that really includes 2 city admins, 1 city clerk, 1 full-time finance manager, 1 full-time building inspector, and our contract employees, the finance manager, as well as the building inspector. I think what we ought to do there is we ought to look at reducing that amount by the full-time finance manager and the full-time building inspector. When we hire them, we put the money back in there, but right now what we ought to do is to save money by using the contractors. So that's my comment on that.
All right, Councilmember Labouvet.
Yeah, I would agree with that also. I mean, my preference would be to model the current state of our personnel budget the way it is rather than the way we might like it to be. And so, you know, I would also suggest that you take the clerk position and model that as being vacant. And so what you end up is pushing our current contractors back into other line items, which is fine, which is, I think, the proper way to do it, because you're basically modeling what we have today. And then when those offers are made, then of course those, you know, the budget would be adjusted when we actually make offers in the council. You know, so I think the city manager can then bring those offers to the city council, and we can approve it, and then we can allocate more money for those offers. I think that would actually, from a modeling perspective, it actually improves your operating margin by quite a bit, because this $1 million will probably come down to like in the 600 range, 600K. And so it's a little bit financial engineering, but it also, I think it is the more proper way to kind of model the budget today.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Turner.
Yes, and I think to add on to Councilmember Labouvet's comment, I also think that it'll actually be more accurate, and it won't look like, you know, it's added with expenses that we don't really incur.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Elahi.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I'm just want to make sure that when we take that out from the regular full-time, the salary that's not being paid, and paid to the contractor, is the contractor expenses showing up anywhere on these expenditures? Because we are paying the finance, individual who's working now. Is that showing up anywhere on this budget, on these expenditure lines?
On this, for the building official and the interim finance person, they do not appear in the consultant line.
So how would we show that? How do we keep track of that? Should that be a separate line for contractors as expenditures? Shouldn't that be there?
It would be under professional services.
So is that on page 71 or not?
Well, it would be account 535.
Okay, you're looking at the, okay,
It is on page 71, yes.
Yeah, so that's the $56,000 annually you projected?
Yeah, but that's for other services.
So where's the fund?
That we contract with.
Okay, no, but we're talking specifically about the finance, which I guess is you.
Yes.
Where does that show up?
That person is, I'm not in there. I'm sorry about that feedback. I'm putting my cell phone on the other side of the room. Okay, the finance person is on the regular full-time line starting July 1st. So
That's what I did last time. Is that what I sounded like last time?
100%
The whole meeting?
year.
Or just, okay.
Yeah, so I guess the confusion is if you put your the independent contractor as assumed it as a full-time and it shows up there, But if you then take it out, we need to show it somewhere else.
Right, so what I would do is remove the FTE from the regular full-time line and move it to the professional service line.
Okay. Yeah, as long as it is in there. Otherwise, we'll have a expense we're paying and not budgeting for it. So as long as all independent contractors that we're now paying, the building and the finance, show up somewhere, that'll be more. They'll reflect appropriately what the budget is.
Okay. And I'll work with the city manager to find out of when he wants to layer in the consultants, FTE personnel.
Okay. Councilmember Labouvet?
And maybe I can help you out here. So there's these kind of contractor charges usually show up on two line items. One is 535 and the other one is 765. And so I agree that we would have to take the FTE out of personnel expenses, and that contracting amount would move to those line items. But it would be lesser amount because it wouldn't include all of the benefits and so forth, wouldn't be included in that are included in this particular accounting. And so until such time as the city manager actually creates an offer and does it, then yeah, they would just show up as what we currently have today as contractor line items.
I agree with that. Yeah, as long as we reflect it somewhere.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Luthol, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I guess my comment is more, it does relate to what Ms. Turner and Mr. Labouvet have been talking about, and that is this issue of budgeting and the expenses, and whether that should be in the employee line or these professional services lines reflecting what's really going on. I look at this budget and I look at it as a public document that we're putting out there, and we're saying this is what we anticipate the next year will most likely look like. And if what you're saying is we anticipate that those positions will remain unfilled for the entirety of the year, then yes, I would say put that in your budget. But otherwise, if those positions are to be filled at any point during the year, you're going to get a mismatch where our budget comes in at a proposed, let's just say $775,000 for personnel expenses. And at the end of year and forever after, when you're reporting and looking at what happened in real life between the budget and the actual, you're suddenly at 100 or 200,000 more in personnel expense. And people are wondering what you did wrong, why it suddenly leapt up. So I would actually be tempted to reflect it pretty much like it is. And if we realize savings because we are doing things in an unusual way by using professional services, we come in under budget at the end of the year. This is not carte blanche to spend the money, and that the city manager can then go out and hire these people without process and so forth. So I would tend to go the other way. I would be realistic about the expectation for the budget and then bring it in at or under budget, rather than having to explain why it went up dramatically mid-year. So those are my thoughts on it. I'm not strongly against it reflecting what's currently going on, but I think as a tool for the public and future councils looking at this, it's probably more consistent to be accurate about what would be most likely to happen if we were at full employment. So those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I actually agree with you. Shall we have any other comments? Councilmember Labouvet, and then I'll open it to.
Maybe we should just ask the city manager, does he, so he modeled this as these are fully loaded at 7-1. Are you planning to make offers, in the near term so that this budget would reflect your near-term reality?
Thank you, Councilmember Labouvet, for your question. So there is somebody that I would be considering making an offer to in the not too distant future, and that would cover one of the contract positions. I think that we adopted previously our new labor agreement this evening. That will have some impact on our numbers going forward as well for the future employee expenses. I concur with what Mayor Pro Tem Luthold said, that we can, tighten up the numbers a little bit, really hone down and make it an exact snapshot of this point in time as of today. But the issue with that was mentioned by the Mayor Pro Tem, that if you do hire an individual or more than one individual, or there are other adjustments, then you will exceed those numbers, and this may be more reflective of what it actually would be. I'm not anticipating in the near future hiring multiple positions.
Yes, Councilmember LaBouvet.
I guess my follow-up would be, so I don't think it's a great look to be increasing the salary benefits budget by 5%. And I know that what's modeled here is not the full impact of the MOU that we just adopted. And so again, our operating margin is only 160K. You can see on this line item that with a 5% increase, that's 50K, right? So, and we have to bring the MOU into this, which is going to increase costs also by probably another 3%. So now you're kind of at 8% increase, and you're really starting to get against the operating margin and deficit, right? And so, so this is something I'm going to really watch this line item very carefully month over month. And if we ever kind of dip into deficit territory, then it's going to be a very different, tough conversation. I would just, I'm fine if we want to model it this way. That's good, but the reality is that we're right on the edge of our budget because of COVID, and so yeah. So that's, I guess that's my comment.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Luthold.
It sounds like we've brought Councilmember LaBouvet around to modeling it this way. I like what he's saying about watching it very closely, and really we look to him to do that because he is the very best at reading these budgets and keeping an eye on these things. And I think, I believe that the city manager understands the challenge that he faces, which would be to bring us in for the next year under budget and on track and looking extremely healthy. So I would assume that he will be looking for savings. We're going to be talking about capital improvement projects and LED lighting and these kinds of things. I think we're always going to have to be looking at return on investment for those. And I think our city manager and city staff are going to be doing that so that they can proudly announce where they're bringing us these savings, whether it's on a monthly basis or at the mid-year budget review, or if we're going to be doing this. I'm not sure if we're going to actually be doing some quarterly reviews now. But I think that's not a bad idea to just really keep our hand really closely on the pulse, especially in the current COVID economic situation.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Turner.
Yes, I think we have an opportunity to actually review this budget mid-year, correct? So we should actually look at that because this is a pretty loaded budget. So we're looking at hiring one city clerk, right? One full-time finance manager and one full-time building inspector. And like Councilmember LaBouvet said, we're at 5% change. And that's pretty steep for our operating margin to be at 160,000.
All right. Any other comments before I take it to open it to public comments? Councilmember LaBouvet.
We didn't talk about the capital budget at all yet, so maybe
Yes.
Mr. City Manager wants to talk about that, and then we can have another round of discussions.
All right, Mr. Leonardis.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lawler. So we do have, as part of this budget, a CIP element. Previously, in past years, that was not incorporated. And we have Engineer Jessica Kahn on the line this evening, as well as Mr. Samaranos, and they can answer your questions regarding the CIP items that are in this budget.
great, thank you. Well, does Ms. Khan need to be unmuted, or is she available to speak?
Oh, no. Hi, I'm here. I'm sorry. I was waiting
Okay.
for a question.
All right, sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, any council member questions? I don't, Councilmember Labouvet.
Okay, so I guess if we're not going to go through sort of all of the capital spending one by one, maybe I'll just make a comment that I do like, and it's nice with this budget, the nice thing about the capital improvement program that, and the way Steve presented it in the document was he actually said, you know, what is the cost of the project? And then he put, what is the source of the revenues? And so in many cases, you see that there's another capital revenue column where we have grant monies that are specific for certain things. And so for me, it's very okay to spend on anything that you have a grant that is a designated source of funds for a specific purpose. That if we're spending on a project that actually has dedicated grant money, then you know that's not the same conversation as the operating budget. And so those kinds of things are perfectly okay. Where you run into trouble is where you have to draw from savings, where if you don't have enough either current year income, capital income, or you don't have you know, grant money that is in reserve specifically for that purpose, then you have to draw from your undesignated savings. And so the one project that I think that perhaps we should look very carefully at is the ADA community center, in that we have, you know, even back to City Manager Terry Blount, in his original offer letter, you know, the previous councils basically said in his offer letter, hey, please do something with the post office. And as part of the ad hoc committee for veterans, you know, Mr. Leonardis showed me the plans of what he wants to do with the community center. And I think it's really a great idea. I really love that project. But unfortunately, you know, between then and now, COVID happened and our revenues really decreased a lot. I think if we would have had a year this year like we had last year, we could have easily funded this community center out of operating income. But this year, because our revenue is so low, the source of funds is actually our undesignated reserve. And so for me, I would like to perhaps postpone the community center until mid-year and take another look at it and see if our, you know, the income side has improved at all. We certainly have the designated reserve of 200K. I think that's a good one. And that has been a long-standing policy to go spend that on the post office. I think the 400K additional that it takes to do that project, I think we should try to fund that out of operating income. And we may have to save for that for a year or two, given the COVID situation. And I think it'd be better to do that than to take that from savings. That's my input.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Turner?
Yes, what I'd like to add to that is I think one of the things we need to see are some of the bids from the builders and the contractors on this ADA. I don't think we're there yet to say, yes, it's 600,000 and it's going to include landscaping or it's going to include lighting and all that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, waiting 6 months is not going to be a whole lot of time to push this thing back forward.
All right,
so
Mayor.
I would agree with Councilmember Labouvet to not go ahead and do this at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Luthold?
Yeah, I'm sort of agreeing and sort of disagreeing with both of those comments. And that is, I think we've started to move forward on this. We've got some planning going on, getting the drawings put together. starting to be able to get our hands around what the bidding is going to bring to us. So I think I'm obviously interested in knowing what those numbers are. If construction costs are down because of COVID and we have an opportunity, we may want to move forward more quickly on this and dip into some of our reserve funds, because there might be an opportunity to move quickly. If our revenues are down, or we're having issues with the state getting our property tax money in, obviously this is a project that we can delay or go slow on. So I don't think we need to approve the capital spending right now. I think the idea is pointing to this in the budget and saying, we think this appears to be the number, and we're going to move ahead on it until we have more information and we can decide. One of the other issues that's out there I'm aware of as a potential revenue source is that our federal government may well be making population-based grants to cities that have suffered from COVID, which is pretty much everyone. And so we may actually have some unusual and unexpected surplus come in this year. I think this would be a wonderful place if we're well positioned and ready to spend it. It would put the money back into the community, it would support jobs, and we would end up with a wonderful capital improvement project for having been ready and acted on it. So I think we already have this option open. Let's keep it open and be ready to move forward as quickly as we can if the opportunity comes forward, and let's be ready to keep it on hold if that's appropriate. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Councilmember Elahi, any comments?
Yes, I think that this is a good discussion we're having. We had this resource sitting there for about 5 years or so. I think if it was a private company, you would not let a resource like that just sit there. Mr. Linares has done a good job on trying to move this forward. There are a number of grants, like Mr. Lithor mentioned, that are coming down, and there's one that I know of with the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. They've actually budgeted about $20,000, which we could get our hands on to have this building carbon free. So for solar items getting put in. And Mr. Linares has a burden of trying to cut as many corners as it is reasonable, or try to get as much competitive bidding as possible to keep the cost down as far as possible. And I'm sure he's going to look at that. So I would suggest moving forward with the project, and before we actually cut the checks, we can see what grants have come in, what funds are available, so that we can put this property to use for the benefit of our residents, and it should be available for them. Otherwise, this will just keep getting postponed month after month, year after year. I know this is the very first thing that I looked at when I was elected to the city council to do something with this project. And we need to move forward. You know, if you stand still, it's going to decay and nothing's going to get done. So we've got a good city manager who's looking at it. He's put plans together. He's already spent some money on it. I think let's go on and try to monitor it as it comes, and also be more aggressive as to seeing what other funds may be available for this project.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Labouvet.
I'll make one more comment. I really am in favor of this project. I'm just a little afraid that we should be a little more conservative given COVID. Maybe if you turn your attention to page 73, the fund balance details. So essentially, if we spend this money, and I'm really talking about the $382,000 that we're pulling out of undesignated reserve. It essentially depletes our undesignated reserve to $28,000 only, right? And then so anything after that is really emergency money. So that's the trade-off here is, do you want to be conservative and try to fund it out of operating income, or do you want to just pull it from savings and say, hey, hopefully things will work out in the future? I personally think that we're going to have a couple of down years, and so we should be, I really want to find a way to do this project too. And of course, I do think that we should take the $200K that has been in reserve for a long time and use that. I'm just suggesting that we wait on the 382,000. You know, he did find $18,000 worth of grant money already, but you know, this extra sort of nominally 400K, just that we have a choice. We can either kind of hold that in the bank and keep that as an emergency fund in our undesignated reserve, or we can spend it. And to me, that's the choice. And so I'd like to hear if anybody has an opinion about and their comfort level with only leaving $28,000 in the undesignated reserve.
Councilmember Turner, and then Councilmember Lahi.
Yes, I still am uncomfortable moving ahead with the ADA. If we look at the economy today, yes, we are in a recession, and it's not going to be probably a one-year recession. It could be a multi-year recession. Somebody was saying that, for example, in Los Gatos, 160,000 citizens have lost their jobs, right? So while you can say, well, Monte Sereno is not effective, Monte Sereno folks work outside Monte Sereno. So I would be a little bit more cautious. And yes, I wouldn't want to go ahead and spend the ADA when we have and use our designated reserves. So that's where I stand on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Lahi?
Yeah, I just want to look at the number. The undesignated reserves is 610,000 and 382 is reserved for the city hall. So that would leave a balance of about 230,000. Am I looking at something incorrectly? I'm looking at the undesignated reserve fund.
No, you have to look at page, if you look at page 73.
Yeah, I believe I'm on that
Look at
page.
page 73 in the fund balance, page 2. Okay, so where it says, so underneath the second yellow bar, it says undesignated reserve, $28,114.
Undesignated reserve was negative 200,000 for pension benefits, and then 28,000 would be left after that. Okay,
No,
but
that
does
doesn't
that
sound like the right page.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the page, the same page 73.
So you should see.
Yeah. So
You
let
should
me
see.
let me
Oh,
point
maybe
out.
the page numbers changed since yesterday.
Yeah, well, it says balance page.
Did the page numbers change? So, yeah, it should be fund balances, page 2 of 2, and then in the there's the savings account and then the LAIF account, LAIF fund reserve, and then the next line item is undesignated reserve, 28,114, and then economic fluctuation reserve of 3.5 million, and then capital improvement program reserve of 500,000. Do you see those numbers?
Yeah, I see that. So isn't that 500,000 available then as a reserve?
Right. So what that means is that we have put a tentative designation against these emergency funds. So the 3.5 million, where that number comes from is that's a little bit greater than what our normal operating income is. And so we have a financial policy that says that we should keep 1 year of reserve or in reserve all the time. And so that's why that 3.5 million is sitting there.
Understood.
I guess the capital improvement program reserve is really sort of up in the air. That was the one I was suggesting that maybe if you cut it in half, you could have half of it for capital improvement and half of it for legal. But this is all the money that we have right here. Everything else is sort of reserved for very specific purposes. So if you look at, you know, that we have $4.3 million in the bank, it's a lot of this is actually reserved for various things, right? Most of that is our very emergency funds.
Well, I mean,
So what we're saying is that we want to basically spend down the undesignated reserve to 28,000 if we want to include this. The alternative would be to leave 400,000 sitting there, and then at mid-year revisit and say, hey, do we want to pull the trigger, or maybe our revenue actually increased and therefore we can take it out of operating income, you know, something like that. It's just, you know, what's the urgency to do it today since there's not really a solid plan in place. So there's certainly enough money in the budget to continue planning, but, you know, we don't have to actually allocate the source of the monies today.
All right, Councilmember, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand that better. I mean, it says subtotal unrestricted reserve of 4 million plus 4,028,000. So, and then if you go up on page 73, where it has a LAIF fund reserve, undesignated reserve of 610,000, and we propose to use 382 for the next year. We still have 220,000, 240,000 or so, close to that left over. So it looks like there's enough funds. And the undesignated reserve of 3.5 million is still a substantive number. So we're not pulling much out of here. So I don't see the need to wait.
I'm sorry, what was the?
Do you mind if I weigh in here for a quick second? I just want to say the argument really is about, do we fund it now or do we fund it later? The fact is we all want to get this done. The fact that it's been earmarked and budgeted is a very conservative thing. I think we have the flexibility to revisit the budget and pay attention to what's happening this year and decide whether or not we want to move forward with it. It is a project that can certainly be pushed off if it needs to be, but at this time, I kind of feel, why wouldn't we just keep it in there and be transparent as possible and see these are all the possible things that we can spend money on, and then we revisit it in a few months. That's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Sounds good.
All right then. If there's no other comments, I'd like to open it to public comment.
But so Liz, I'm just trying to understand your comment. So you do want to appropriate for it today or
Yeah,
not?
I do.
Okay.
I do. All right. Seeing that there's no one in the public that wants to speak to this item, I will then bring it back for a motion. Do we have, at this time, do we have a motion to approve the budget as presented to us?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a second. Mr. Leonardis, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lawler. Councilmember Lobove.
Yes.
Councilmember Turner.
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Luhold.
Yes.
Mayor Lawler.
Yes,
Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
thank you. All right, moving on to unfinished business. Item number 7, 16005 Greenwood Lane Resolution. Mr. Rudin, do you have anything you'd like to say to this item?
At this point, I do not. I would suggest taking public comment. Basically, the resolution reflects the prior direction of the City Council at the conclusion of the public hearing. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Council member questions? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Luthold.
Yeah, I noticed that at the beginning of the meeting, we reflected a no written comments, and I treated that as a general receipt of no written comments because we have received several written comments relating to what is now line item 7. They include a legal letter from Todd Williams' firm representing the applicant. There was an email from former Mayor Lon Allen, and there was also a letter I saw just in the afternoon packet from, I believe it was Ms. DiCanio's attorney. And we've also received correspondence from Tony Jeans on this in writing and email. So I would hope that the city manager acting as city clerk has gathered all of those into the record, but those written documents we've received will be part of the public record, as well as any others. And maybe Mr. Leonardis can list them out if he has any others that I missed there.
All right, thank you. Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Mayor Lawler. So yes, we will make all those pieces of correspondence part of the public record, and some of them have exceeded the 3-minute time limit established by our word count policy if I were to read them into the record, but I could probably read Mr. Allen's correspondence this evening. I believe the council, all of you have been copied on it, and I can definitely read that aloud if council desires, or we could just make it part of the public record. We do have a number of speakers this evening. It looks like about somewhere between 12 and 15. 3?
Yes, we
Okay,
have
well,
people that wish to speak at this time.
we have 12 or 15 people on the meeting this evening, but we have 3 who wish to speak that have their hands up. So we will be hearing from the public as well.
All right, then why don't, if we don't have any other council member questions or comments, I'm going to open it to public hearing, and then we'll bring it back to council. So, are there any members wishing to speak on this item? You use the raise your hand function, and I will call you in the order they appear on my screen. So, Karen Krupp, council recognizes Karen Krupp. You are now permitted to talk. You're still on mute. There you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Krupp, and I'm across the street, and I've had a chance to meet the owners of this property. And I feel that blank dirt with no creatures, no birds, no bunnies, I don't feel that that's the proper way to treat this area. I feel that their plans are gracious and beautiful, and these people are humble and lovely, and this is America, people. They've earned the right to build near us. And of course it's going to be a problem. Of course it's going to be a bit of a, angst to have all this building near me. But I just know that these people will create a beautiful and gracious place across the street from us and will uplift the area. And I'm not quite sure why people have a problem with it, because there's been a lot of building around us, and they have a beautiful, gracious, gorgeous plan. So, which I guess doesn't have any variances, and that's what I don't get. Because this is America. Why shouldn't they be able to build with the hard work that they've legally earned? Why shouldn't they be able to embrace and uplift the area that we call Monte Sereno? And we're very lucky, because when we rebuilt our house, we sailed through site and architectural. No problem at all. And why would these nice people who have earned a lot and built a lot not be able to have the same gifts that we derived from the city?
All right, thank you very much. Council recognizes Stephen Cole. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Stephen Cole, and I live at 16216 Greenwood Road, and I've been in this home since 1982. I was disappointed and appalled by the actions of the council at the last meeting regarding this property. The applicant had spent a considerable amount of money and a considerable amount of time working with your planning department. And your planning department came to the meeting and basically said they have met all the criteria, not one exception, for them to go ahead and build. And so with that, you took public testimony from a number of their neighbors who, for whatever their own reasons are, their own personal reasons are, were objecting to the building of that property. And so the council then took it upon themselves, rather than relying on their own employee, their own planning department that had no exceptions in their report, to listen to those few individuals and make a judgment, right, that was swayed by them and supposedly their experts to deny the applicants their property. And so I feel that the council acted irresponsibly, unfairly, and even illegally in this regard. And so what's the upshot to this? The council now has denied this person the right to have a house where they have gone before the council with 0 exceptions. Had there been a request for a variance, that would have been an entirely different matter. But that's not what happened here. And so what the council has now done is denied them their home and also denied Monte Sereno an increase in their tax base once they build it. So you now have the opportunity to right this wrong, and I'm hoping you'll do so. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council recognizes Sonia Traus.
Unmute. Hi. Hi, my name is Sonia Traus. I'm calling as the Executive Director of YIMBY Law and also as a resident of California, somebody that's interested in seeing California laws be followed. YIMBY Law, we're an organization and we sue cities that are in violation of the Housing Accountability Act. And the Housing Accountability Act says that once a city like Monte Sereno makes zoning laws, then they have to follow them, you know, and if somebody comes and proposes something that's within the zoning, you really don't have discretion to turn it down unless you make findings that it's a threat to public health and safety, which is like very, very hard to make. So this counts. It is housing, and we get involved, you know, single family homes like this, apartments, market rate housing, subsidized housing, any type of housing is covered by the Housing Accountability Act. I really think that you should approve this. One, because if you don't, you know, we could sue you, or the project sponsor could sue you, or both. In this case, I mean, this house is replacing an empty lot. We've been looking for, you know, a single family case to get involved in, and Monte Sereno is, you know, it's a good city for that. The other thing though, with this particular project is that the applicant initially wanted to do a house plus an ADU, and evidently planning staff, you know, changed their mind. And I think that the applicant has been very accommodating and really trying to work with everybody. It doesn't make sense to me that you would turn this one down, because the applicant can come back with that house plus ADU, you know, and then you're still going to have to approve that, which is something that the neighbors said that they didn't want. So I think that you should take the project that you have now, which is something that that a lot of people already worked on. So thanks so much, and I hope that you build this housing.
All right, thank you. Council recognizes Catherine Proctor. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, this is Glenn Proctor.
Yes.
I'm on my wife's. I wanted to point out that despite everything that's being said so far, the people on Greenwood, the people that are opposed to this development, are not opposed to building something on this lot. What we are opposed to is the building that's being proposed to put on this lot. Just as simple as that. And in fact, someone made a comment that all the criteria has been met. But in fact, our city manager, I don't know if it was a clerical, or excuse me, the city planner, I don't know whether it was a clerical mistake or not, but in the staff report, I was going over it again, and I noticed that it's very interesting that there was 15 pages devoted to this development. And it's very interesting that on the design guidelines, that items 4A5, 4B3, and 5A2 weren't even addressed. And those are issues of mass and working with the contours of the site. Not even addressed. on those items, and I'm wondering whether that was on purpose or a mistake. I thought that we were already at the last council meeting. I thought it was already determined that this development, this house is denied. And I propose that what we do is we move on, tell the applicant, by all means, if you want to build something here, build something here. But to tell us that the best thing to do is to get this structure, this huge mass of structure, and put it on top of the hill or the ridge line here, however you want to call it. It is at least a hillside there. To just put that on top, and the reason that we have to approve it is that this will minimize the grading, is just an inappropriate kind of thing to say for a city planner, I think. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Council recognizes Todd Williams. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, council members. My name is Todd Williams, and I'm a land use attorney representing the applicant. As our written comments point out, we believe the city's denial of the project would be unlawful under the Housing Accountability Act, as well as constitutional principles, the city's own planning rules, and would also be in bad faith. One point of clarification about the HAA, the act applies to housing development projects found or deemed to be found consistent with the city's objective rules. That is the case here. Moreover, the city is constrained from denying such projects except in very narrow circumstances not present here. Based on a conversation I had with the city attorney as to the application and interpretation of the HAA, I want to make clear that we believe absolutely that the HAA applies even to one single family home. You'd have to ignore the entire legislative purpose of the act to conclude otherwise. The act defines a housing development project as a quote unquote use that consists of any of the following: mixed use developments, plural, transitional or supportive housing, or residential units only, meaning a purely residential project. To say that the HAA doesn't apply for one home is an unreasonable and very risky interpretation. One could not make a straight-faced argument, for example, that a mixed-use developments means the HAA only applies if there are multiple mixed-use developments. There's no justification in the context of the legislation, which must be read as a whole, to say that this project is not covered, and I'm not aware of any legislative history suggesting otherwise. The position that the HAA would not apply is contrary to the purpose and legislative intent, which, among other things, compels an interpretation favorable to the creation of new housing. The HAA states, quote, "It is the policy of the state that this section be interpreted and implemented in a manner to afford the fullest possible weight to the interest of and the approval and provision of housing," unquote. Interpreting the HAA to apply only to multiple units contravenes that specific legislative intent. Moreover, the act puts a heavy burden on the local agency to validly deny even a single unit of new housing and puts significant downside risk on the agency. To be sure, the city is taking a legal risk by denying this project. In any event, we believe that denial is a violation of the HAA and an abuse of discretion. It's also in conflict with the city's own regulations and contrary to the evidence supporting the approval as detailed in the staff report and other submittals to the city. We ask that the city not approve the draft resolution and instead direct staff to draft a resolution for approval of the project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Council recognizes Richard Drury.
Hello, this is Richard Drury. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm an attorney representing Jack and Michelle DeCanio, who live immediately adjacent to the proposed project. I'd just like to start with the fact that the Site and Architecture Committee rejected this project unanimously by a 3-0 vote, finding that it does, in fact, fail to comply with many objective policies of the general plan. Today, the developer's lawyer submitted what's really a Hail Mary lawyer letter claiming that this action violates the Housing Accountability Act, the Takings Clause of the United States Constitution. It's really quite a reach. And also the City Council rejected the project just 2 weeks ago, and we urge you just to reaffirm your decision. First, I'd like to say the Housing Accountability Act, the full title is Housing and Development Projects for Affordable, Very Low, Low and Moderate Income Households. This is not a low income housing project. This is a multi-million-dollar single family residence. It's simply, the HAA just doesn't apply to it. The HAA defines housing development projects as residential units only. The plural is very significant. This is not a development, it's a single family home. Of all of the many cases that have interpreted the HAA, none has applied it to a single family residence. That would be an amazing stretch for the legislature to try to preempt local zoning control over every single family residence. It's never been interpreted that way. Also, the HAA, if it were to apply, requires compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act first. In the case of Schellinger versus Sebastopol, which I've cited in my letter. We believe that this project is not exempt from CEQA review because the Architecture and Site Committee found that it fails to comply with several general plan provisions. And therefore, it has significant impacts. It will be removing protected trees. It fails to comply with aesthetic provisions of the general plan. Those are all significant impacts within the meaning of CEQA. And finally, on the takings clause argument, I mean, that's really beyond the pale. Ever since Agins versus Tiburon, the Supreme Court has held that application of zoning laws is not a constitutional taking. I'd be happy to respond to any questions. In short, we urge the City Council to just reaffirm its decision from 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Council now recognizes Mike Mack.
Good evening, everybody. First, let me say that I find it outrageous and ridiculous that we are still talking about this topic. It's just unthinkable to me. Aside, you know, the remarkable commentary from Stephen Cole and the supposed attorney representing the developer, both of which whose comments were just ridiculous. I'm just curious, Councilmember Elahi, why did you specifically ask about litigation during the budget discussion?
I guess I'll keep my comments once the public subject is over. I'll try to respond to your question.
Sure, that would be great, because I thought it was very curious. Secondly, Councilmember Elahi and Councilmember Sean, I can't remember what your last name is. Why are you so readily willing to ignore the guidelines of the city of Monte Sereno, which clearly this proposed development violates in extreme fashion?
Linda Murphy, if you can drive, and two things. First, I'd like to give a shout out to the people who have spoken up tonight from the police of Lafayette.
I'm waiting for a response.
I'm excited to see the young people get involved in civic action. So thank you for them.
If you're directing that to me, Sean Luthold, the public comment time is the time for public comment. We will be responding or not responding during our time of discussion.
Okay. All right. Excellent. I'll stay on and listen. The third question I have for both Councilmember Elahi and Luthold: why are you so inclined to ignore the concerns and comments of those who are immediately affected by this development in favor of some random developer? I'm totally perplexed. Thank you.
Mary, you're on mute. Mary Lawler, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay, I will take it now back to, I will close public comment and bring it back to council at this time for council discussion. To be honest with you, I think we've already voted on this item, and unless someone has changed their mind, I would like to make a motion to adopt the denial, to adopt the resolution to uphold.
Mayor, before we move forward, I see 3 additional hands raised for public comment. If those are people who've already spoken, then you need not.
Nope, they just entered. I'm so sorry. I will give Councilmember Elahi and Lutholtz an opportunity to speak after this, but I will go ahead and call first. Council recognizes Tony Jeans. Thank you, Sergio.
Thank you, Tony Jeans here. I'm again very surprised that this has become a dialogue and that the hearing is supposedly open again. But I do want to point out one of the factual elements that really throws the idea of litigation by the applicant to me in a very far-fetched way. They had a significant error in their civil drawings, which identified the height difference between the main floor and the grade outside in front where you had to come down to by an error of several feet. I'm not looking at plans now. I wasn't expecting to have to talk tonight. But what that meant was that the 2 or 3 foot retaining wall that was proposed to run along the front of the building for a distance of approximately, I think, 280 feet, would be 6 or 7 feet tall. Now, if you look at the city guidelines, you can't have a 7 foot high retaining wall. It just doesn't pass muster factually in the objective standards, the codified rules of the city. And because the error was made by the civil engineer and not caught by the architect, the planner was not able to see that. Consequently, you have a project which cannot be built as it has been shown in elevations, renderings, and plans. So what you have is an impossible project, which would only come to light when you start building it and you realize that you're going to be way, way, way up in the air when you come out of the front door. So you have a factual problem which would need to be resolved and cannot be resolved by passing this project. So I have the factual basis does not allow that. And in fact, the architect at the hearing, when I pointed out that fact, he said, oh, well, we can lower the height of the building a little bit and make it work. Well, that's not how you make it work, but he could have got one aspect that he is delinquent in under control. But getting back to the point where we are now, you voted on it once, council. I think you need to vote on it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Council recognizes Ibiswa Thalapragada.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Lawler and council members. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to communicate our thoughts on the SDP application and city processes. We continue to maintain that this is a fully compliant development project that not only meets but exceeds the city's general plan, zoning and design guidelines, and a praiseworthy project in terms of engineering efficiencies, minimal tree removals, despite reduced impervious coverage due to slope. Respecting the land contours, robust landscape plans, giving neighbors setbacks that are many times greater than what the city's development guidelines dictate, and accommodating their request to move the driveway further than their own driveway to protect their trees. They keep driving on the base of the tree to begin with. A few points of clarification and corrections from the June 16 meeting. Under the city rules, our home is 5990 square feet. with an accessory structure of 993 square feet. It is not 8,500, it is not 10,000, it is not 20,000. We are not exceeding allowed building height of 30 feet and will certify the building height by a licensed surveyor as is required during construction. We will certainly address all construction details during construction time, during building permit process, not necessarily so many details at the planning phase. Tree number 14, removal at the corner of the street is not needed. It is dying and we are offering to remove. If the city wants to take over the removal, we are very happy not to remove it. And then we removed the ADU after the SNA meeting on the advice of the staff that it is by right and not subject to SDP process or the appeal. It's unfortunate that the SNA commission did not approve our project in November, even though it was fully compliant. No variance project, unlike other projects they approved in the past, despite similar objections, and even projects with far more grading and large-scale removal of trees on Dave's Avenue, on Constitution, on Mays, on Withy Avenue. We have examples of those. But we look at it in the stride and went back with significant design changes over several months to address what we thought were purely design issues raised by Sunday to the city council. So as an appeal pursuant to city's rules. So we were disappointed to find that we were denied again due to intense political lobbying and one-sided reports as a result of such subjective and not objective criteria were cited to deny our project, in contrast to the city's prior determination of full compliance of our project. During this long process of intense pressure, where our project was subjected to higher and different standards than any other residential project in the history of Monte Sereno, be it in the form of a website created exclusively for a project, more rigorous deadlines, pushing our hearings around and causing us significant financial and time loss. We waited patiently in the spirit of mutual cooperation, which was never extended to us. We urged the council to reevaluate your proposal, a denial, and vote to approve this fully compliant staff-supported project, keeping in mind fairness, equal protection, reasonable economic enjoyment of our investment, and not set a dangerous precedent for the city, in particular Bay Area development projects in general, by rejecting a project in bad faith and letting neighboring owners dictate how we are allowed to utilize our land based on conditions that they or their predecessors created, such as using our neighbors' trees as an excuse to deny us using up a 31 feet by 200 feet of a wide stretch of a flattest area of our lot. They're preventing us using that, preventing any development there, allowing same neighbor to enjoy the fully, their property fully, including driving over the base of the same subject trees that they want us to protect. We'd like to respectfully reiterate that we have been treated unfairly, denied equal opportunity, and are being restricted in our enjoyment of our economic investment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to the next, we have council recognizes Jack Tacanio. You are allowed to talk.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council. Just a few comments. I'll try not to repeat what others have said. It is very clear that the Housing Accountability Act does not apply to this property. In over 2 decades since that act has been enacted by the state legislature, not a single California court has ever applied it to a single family residence, not once in 2 decades. Tony Jeans and others have talked about the objective standards that have been violated, including misstatements with respect to drawings and renderings, where we have introduced evidence that suggests that they inaccurately reflect the dimensions of the structures and of the property. And this is very familiar territory for us, because before the Site and Architecture Committee, one member of the Site and Architecture Committee said, the inaccuracy in the depiction of the topography of the land in the renderings and elevations is disturbing to me. You can't even really get a feel for how much slope there is. And that has not been resolved by the staff report. Lastly, the purpose of the Housing Accountability Act was to encourage the building of affordable housing for low-income Californians. The suggestion that somehow a wealthy lot owner who is building a house that once completed will be worth over $6 million, and to use that statute designed for low-income Californians trying to get residence is wrong. This city council should not condone that. and you want to call that a test case, my last comment is this. It cannot be the situation with this city council that every time a lawyer starts to pump their chest and wag their finger at you and accuse you of acting politically because you are listening to the concerns of all neighbors. I remember that last hearing. It went on for hours, and you listened to all of it. And to suggest that somehow the decision was unfair is wrong. But it would be equally wrong now to just cave to pressure, because you're going to set a very dangerous precedent that any applicant who is aggrieved will just pump their chest, shake their finger, and the city council will reverse their decision. I would respectfully request that suggest that that's not good governance. We've all heard you go through the budget, and we understand your concern for the citizens of our city. I think your decision reflected that, and I thank you all very much for it.
All right, thank you. Council recognizes Paul Bellotti. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Paul Bellotti. I'm an architect that lives in Saratoga and in San Francisco. I grew up here since I was 9 months old, so I'm pretty familiar with the area. I just want to say a couple of things. One, this project has been a moving target from the beginning. And I think the objective standard is that the plans need to be accurate and complete, particularly even before it is submitted to the Planning Commission. Since that submittal, there have been several different versions that we've seen. And the last one, a couple of items. One, the civil plans do not match many items that the architectural plans show. And then secondly, which concerns me very much, is that trees number 7 and 8 miraculously are now being removed, which I don't understand because they have no impact to the house nor to the garage accessory structure. And they're beautiful oak trees, and I don't get why all of a sudden in the past couple of weeks they're going to be removed. So that is all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you. Council now recognizes Sumati Dinesh.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. So I just wanted to say I totally support the building plans for 16005 Greenwood Lane. Over here, the reason for denial is listed as mass and trees, which I feel is absurd because mass is a subjective opinion. What feels bulky to me might feel sleek to another person. And given that their plans conform to the city limits, right, or to the city planning guidelines, and the city staff has approved it, and I totally trust in the abilities of our city staff, especially Jeannie, to do her job and do a good job. And I don't understand why we have so many meetings to second guess the judgment from our city planning department. I do understand the neighbors have concerns, but at this point of time, it doesn't seem like it's a health and safety concern. And let's not open up our city to lawsuits. I mean, all of us pay property taxes and a pretty penny to live here. And we shouldn't be wasting our money on lawsuits for the city. So I just recommend to go ahead and give the Reddies an opportunity to enjoy their property. They've worked hard. They've bought their piece of land. They want to build their dream home. This is the American dream, and everyone has a fair right to dream, to build a nice house on their property. And if it's within their means to do so, if they're conforming to the city guidelines, let's just be fair and grant them the approval. I'm sure they can plant trees somewhere else, or you can make some other exceptions. But from the beginning of history, if you look at it, we've cleared forests to build land and to open up land and build cities. So just using the tree argument seems counterproductive to me. And I don't think mass should be a big concern for blocking a housing project, because like I said, it's a very subjective opinion. what looks bulky to me might look sleek to someone else. So I would say in the interest of the city, please approve this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, are there any other members wishing to speak on this item before I close it? Raise your hand now. Okay, seeing none, I will take it back to council for further discussion. This is an item that we did already vote on. Thank you everyone for your continued testimony. Unless someone has changed their mind, I move to adopt the resolution to uphold the denial of the Site and Architectural Commission. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, please.
All right.
I think we have the right to have council member comment. The public has directed questions at us, and I think we should be allowed to give them the respect of responding.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Luther, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I do want to be clear to the people who oppose this project that I actually agree with many of the things you have said. I don't like this house, and I don't like this house on this location. But I don't think that is the standard that I get to apply here. There is a major question right now as to the legality and whether we're looking at an objective standard or a subjective question. It is my belief that this falls into the subjective, and that has colored my decision on being very grudgingly willing to approve this project. I think that the problem is with the process, and this is something that we need to take a look at, and that is when Site and Architecture rejects a project out of hand quite correctly, 5-0, and then that project comes to us with a completely different or quite different set of plans, modified set of plans, that we are then asked to look at essentially on an appeal, but it's different from what Site and Architecture looked at. This is a procedural problem that the city has. There's no good way around it because that is the way the procedure works when we have a Site and Architecture as a recommending body. People are allowed to do this. I believe that the homeowners did the improvements that were asked of them, and that the staff did the job of finding that those met the objective standards. I think that the concern is that this is still not the right house for this location. And I think my fellow council members are expressing that. And so in the sense that they are rejecting this subjectively, I would indicate that I feel the same way. My vote is not going to change tonight because I don't think that will apply. I think that the homeowners met the objective standards. They didn't apply for the variances. And again, although I don't like the home, I think they've pushed it to the max. They told me they were going to be empty nesters, and yet they want to build a home that pushes the limits within a few feet and then adds the basement, which they can get away with adding, that really should be considered part of the square footage. I don't know that they've been completely straightforward with us, whether this is a development or their dream home, but I still feel they have the right, based on meeting the objective standards, to go forward. And that's why I won't be changing my vote, even though I do want to indicate that I agree that with the criticisms of this house, and I would be very pleased if the homeowners, rather than approaching this as a litigation type matter, would come back with a set of plans that actually fits with Monte Sereno and that beautiful hillside and respects the opinions that have been given to them by the neighbors, because that really isn't the right house for the hillside. So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lahi, did you want to respond or?
Yes, I do. And rather than discussing the merits of this project, which I think you've done ad nauseum, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Sean's responses. There was a question that was specifically directed by Mr. Mike Mack. I don't know what his full name is. I also looked at the chat where he was asking who do these people think they are? Compulsive liars, bullies, they're repellent. I don't know if that was addressed to me or to the applicant. I assume that really expresses the frustrations a lot of people have on this. I definitely respect every comment that's come in. I respect the neighbors. Monte Sereno is a unique city. It has a unique identity, and we have to do everything to preserve it. As a lawyer, and you have two lawyers on this city council, that doesn't make us any better or worse than anybody else on this council, because everybody's trying to do the best they can in this voluntary position. But unfortunately, as lawyers, we look at it from the legal perspective, and I really have a very serious concern about litigation in this case, which is going to ensue based on the Housing Accountability Act, and we've had at least, and there's different lawyers saying different things. The only problem is the city of Monte Sereno is the one who's going to end up footing the bill. If we win, we put our own bill. If we lose, we put our own bill, and we probably also end up footing the bill for the prevailing party. So I'm really concerned about that. That's why I wanted to put it in the budget and say, okay, let's see if we have room for it. My thought would be, I know the vote is there, what it is, and I'm not going to change my vote either, would be to go to closed session so we can really look at the legal arguments and get the benefit from our lawyer, Mr. Rudin, who can kind of go through those arguments, and we can all discuss them in more detail and say, what are our chances of getting sued on this thing? And if it looks like we're going to prevail, then we'll move forward with it. If it looks like we're going to end up paying a lot of attorney's fees, then we need to reconsider it. So I would table this resolution for now, take it to a closed session, and have a real sit-down discussion with our council and any other expertise we can get on this particular subject, because this is going to keep coming up again and again. And maybe a one-house residence is exempt from the HAA, maybe it is not. Maybe we're the test case, and we've already had a public interest law firm, YIMBY, send us a letter that they're looking for a case like this, because there probably hasn't been a case like this before. But do we want to make Monte Sereno the test case for this particular subject, where we end up paying YIMBY's fees and our fees also? That is my really concern. The other question that Mr. Mike Mack, and I don't have your full name, so was whether why we're ignoring the concern of neighbors and the design things. I look at our city planning commission department, when they give us a recommendation, we need to find substantial evidence against that, and substantial objective evidence against that. And it wasn't there. I mean, there are design considerations, but I don't think they rise to that level itself. And the neighbors in Monte Sereno do a wonderful job. They protect the city. They come in and they express what the city should do, and that's why we preserve it. I mean, in these COVID days, we see everybody walking in the neighborhood, going up, walking the streets and enjoying. Unfortunately, because of COVID restrictions, they're enjoying the city streets, and it's a great blessing to have that. I would urge that let's take this into a closed session where we can understand the legal positions on this issue, because we really haven't had a chance to digest all of them. And to make a decision now and then later on end up paying for fees and costs, I don't think it's in the interest of the city. And who we are, as Mr. Mike asked us, so who these people, who do these people think they are? We're volunteers. We're trying to serve the city. We're trying to do the best we can, and we'll make some right decisions. We'll make some wrong decisions, and I hope you can appreciate and understand what we're doing. And on the one hand, we have to balance the amount of time and money the developer has spent in trying to come up with a plan that the Planning Commission has approved, with the neighbors who've also spent a lot of time and effort and resources into opposing the plan. And so we have to balance those two things. And my goal at first is, not to do any harm. So if you approve a project that actually does harm to the city, we should avoid it. So I would recommend we table this and take it to closed session.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, we do have a motion on the table. We have a motion and a second. So why don't we take a vote on this? Mr. Leonardis, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Lebovee?
No.
Wait, no, this is a resolution to uphold the denial of the site and architecture.
Okay. So we're voting on your motion, or we're voting on the motion to take this to closed session?
I don't think there was a motion made for that.
Yeah, if I make that motion, would that motion be heard first?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll move that we take it to close session.
I'll second that.
All right, Mr. Leonardis, roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Lobove,
No.
Councilmember Turner,
No.
Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Luthold,
Yes.
Mayor Lawler.
No.
The motion fails 2-3.
So now we'll go back to the motion to adopt the resolution to uphold the denial of the Site and Architectural Commission and denying site development permit.
Councilmember Lobove,
Yes.
Do you have a second on that, just for a technicality?
I'll second.
Okay, good.
so Councilmember Lobove is yes. Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Luthold,
No.
Mayor Lawler.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 3-2.
Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. Item number 8, Monte Sereno's participation in the Santa Cruz-Santa Clara County Airport Roundtable for 2021. Mr. Leonardis, do you have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Lawler. So this was put on the agenda at the request of Councilmember Turner, and they have been having these meetings since 2018, the Airport Roundtable, and I included our original MOU with the agency and the purpose in the staff report, so I hope you all had a chance to take a look at that. There has been some discussion among some of the members whether they should continue their membership through the Cities Association and this Airport Roundtable. Particularly Santa Cruz and Capitola were considering dropping out. I think they may have dropped out of the roundtable at this point in time. There was concern about budget in those agencies. To us, the budget is somewhere around $1,000 currently. The remaining members would have to pick up the balance of members who did decide to drop out of the roundtable. So if more members dropped out, case in point, say Santa Cruz and Capitola drop out, we would go up to $1,300. If other members were to drop out, our annual fee would go higher. I think there's other things to consider as depicted in the staff report, some things about will this have any impact on the Monte Sereno, city limits? If the planes are flying at 9,000 feet, they're flying above Saratoga before they make their descent. But ultimately, one of the other things to consider is all of these rules are regulated by the FAA. So initially when this roundtable, I think, was put together, it was kind of a way to say, whoa, what's going on? You're going to fly planes over our communities. We want to have some input on that. And I think now that it has been going on for a couple of years, and the FAA ultimately will be making the decision, I think that it's possible that the cities, regardless of how they feel, will just have to take what they get from the FAA. So that concludes my report. I'm open for questions.
All right, thank you. Any council member questions at this time? No? Okay. I guess I can take it to public hearing. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none. All right, then we'll come back and both Councilmember Turner and I serve on this roundtable, and it's been very enjoyable, but it has served its purpose, and I think that I think we can afford to not continue as a member for the time being and see what happens with the FAA in the future, because ultimately the FAA it has their rules for a reason, and they did develop a system by which residents can participate and give their input on flight patterns. So I think the roundtable has accomplished a lot in that regard. So I think that Councilmember Turner, yes.
Yes, so I've been serving on this one since 2018, and when I became mayor last year, Mayor Lawler actually filled in. The problem that we were trying to solve at that time was the south flow traffic coming in from Santa Cruz to San Jose. And a lot of the cities around us, Los Altos Hills, Palo Alto, were complaining about the noise. Now, the noise does not really affect Monte Sereno and Los Gatos because planes fly over the Saratoga Hills. And so when they come down no longer at 9,000, the height of 9,000 feet. And so therefore, you will not really hear a lot of the sound. When we first started this, the mayor at that time, who was Curtis Rogers, thought that we were looking at the helicopters that were flying over Monte Sereno and some of the small airplanes, but that's not really even part of this roundtable. So at this point in time, I think it is really not advantageous for us. There are no advantages for us to actually be part of this committee. Should we decide that they may change the flight path in the future, then we may elect to go in. But at this point in time, I would recommend that we don't participate.
Okay. Then does staff have, I think we can go ahead and direct staff to discontinue our participation in the roundtable at this time.
Mayor, I believe, I don't see any speakers on this item, but we should still call on the public.
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. One step ahead of you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Rudin, on this item, it's just a consensus vote. There's no resolution required at a future meeting. Is that correct?
Well, this item was agendized as, direction. So if the council directs staff to provide a resolution at a subsequent meeting, we could do that. I looked at the MOU and it doesn't specifically provide for any sort of express termination provision. So, figuring out exactly, with the other agencies, what is expected to terminate that MOU, whether it can be just done by the city sending a letter. I don't know, Steve, if you've had any sort of discussions along those lines with any of the other agencies, but I would presume that simply a notice that we are terminating our participation be sufficient.
Yes, that was mentioned in the MOU. I believe it's a 30-day written notice, just a letter. So if council were to direct me to issue such letter, I would be happy to comply.
Okay.
On behalf of council.
Do we have everyone directing staff to do so? Yep, it's unanimous.
I just had a comment.
Sure.
It's only $1,000. Is there something gained by participating in meetings like this where other cities are there and some of them are affected by the airport? I mean, if Monte Sereno participates, I mean, we have one vote, but we're only paying $1,000 for it. Some of the other cities are paying as much as $30,000 or $40,000 for it. I mean, do we gain something? I mean, as a coordinated effort with other cities when we may need them for something else, to have one of our city council members go on those boards and participate, or are those boards pretty useless and they don't do anything? I guess former Mayor Turner probably has comments on that, and maybe Mayor Lawler has comments on that, because we're only talking about $1,000, and it's like getting, how much bang do we get for $1,000, and how much do we expect to get out of it? So if you get give us some information on that to see whether it's worth terminating it or whether we could stay on it.
Councilmember Turner?
The agenda that's on the table for probably the next year and a half is going to be about supersonic jets, okay? The jets that are larger than the Concorde. Well, they don't fly over Monte Sereno or Los Gatos. Los Gatos has never participated in this. San Jose has not participated. Peters has not participated. So while we can participate, our vote is in one small area, and really the noise doesn't come over Monte Sereno. So it's basically irrelevant to us at this point in time, and the decision will be made by the FAA. Basically, what they always say is, well, you know, it's about this passenger safety, and therefore we have to do it this way. And that's what I've seen so far. So that's my opinion.
Yes, I agree with that opinion. So I think we can go ahead and remember, I think the idea of this is we're terminating it for now with the option to rejoin later if we feel we need to.
Thank you.
All right. So Mr. Leonardis, you have direction?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I will draft a letter and send it to the Cities Association.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, review of City of Monte Sereno Council ad hoc committees. Mr. Leonardis, staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. So in conjunction with the strategic goals and the budget, I thought it would be a good time to bring forward the council ad hoc committee appointments. Several of these committees have expired, and I have included a list of the current ad hoc committee that we have in the staff report. And they expire at the 1 year from inception point automatically. And I know things like the Veterans Association and the one for the wildfire protection might be ones that the council desires to continue, but technically, at least the Veterans one is currently expired. There are ones like the Social Media Policy Committee that are currently inactive. I don't know if the council wishes to re-up those or continue that or disband that and consider adding something from the adopted goals list, the 2020-2021 strategic goals list that we had on May 12th that we had adopted, and it's in the staff report as well. I look at some items from the strategic goals list, and there is things like the Good Neighbor Resolution implementation. There is of course, the Veterans Memorial previously stated. There is the idea to adopt a climate action plan. And I wanted at this time to give council the opportunity to weigh in on the future ad hocs if they wish to create new ad hocs. I also thought it would be a good time. We adopted the budget this evening, and we want to come up with a work plan moving forward from this plan forward. So we adopted the budget, the MOU. It's a brand new year, July 1st, our brand new fiscal year. So I want to divide the year into quarters, and whatever ad hocs we'll be working on whatever items I want to place those in the work plan going forward, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And I realize that every year when we choose a new mayor, there is also an opportunity to do committee appointments. And I think it's a good idea to consider, because we don't know, especially during election years, who will be on council and who will not be on council, but also to potentially revisit the ad hoc committee appointments at that time as well. So do it in conjunction with the strategic goals and the budget, the adopted goals, and that go in ultimately into the budget in June, well, by July 1st, and then do it in December when the new mayor is appointed. Check in both of those times of the year for the ad hoc committees so we can keep them active. The ones, again, that are important, or the ones that are disbanded, remove those, and then add the new work items and continue forward. And with that, that concludes my staff report. We're just looking for council direction and open for questions.
All right, thank you. Council member questions. Who would like to start? Okay. Council member Labouvet.
So are you suggesting that we take because I think everything is expired now except for SB2 planning grant. So do we get to renew these, or are we just inventing some new ad hoc committees? Is that the intent here?
That is correct. So considering that the SB2 planning grant is the only one now that is still remaining, and that one I think expires on December 3rd, I'm looking for direction that if council would like to take the strategic goals, which is essentially going to formulate our work plan and create new ad hoc committees or re-up the ad hoc committees such as the Veterans Administration, the Veterans Memorial rather, I'm sorry. And then the fire.
All right. Well, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think being able to do this all at once is efficient. I do like the ideas of the good neighbor ad hoc that can kind of tie into the whole site and architecture goal of getting together with them and really working that out. And of course, the Veterans Memorial, I think we still need to get that accomplished. And the climate action plan, I think is interesting for sure. That would include Arbor Day. And I think wildfire obviously is something that's still very, very important. So I would propose that we create those 4 for the year, potentially, if I don't know if anybody agrees with me or.
So did you mention the operational excellence one also? There's quite a few line items in the plan that are really kind of operational focused.
No, I did not, but I should have. Thank you for that. Customer orientation, operational excellence. So that would be potentially 5. And SB2 will just sort of expire in December. We don't need social media. So those seem like a good place to start. Councilmember Turner.
Yes, I think one of the things that we should look at is really all the bills that are coming down for housing. And we should have a committee to keep track of those. That committee was the CASA Compact, which is no longer valid. However, there are about 150 bills that are coming down from Sacramento on housing affordability.
All right. So that would give us 1, 2, 3, 6 ad hoc committees potentially. And Mr. Leonardis, oh, yes.
So maybe I just wanted to comment from Mayor Pro Tem Leuthold. So SB2 grant, we had written those objectives pretty broad so that, it could or could not, include good neighbor. So the question is, do we want to try to combine that effort, or I was majority guy contributing to good neighbor piece. So I would like to have an active partner in some of these things to get a little more work done. So do we want to combine that and sort of recast that in terms of who's on it, or what's your feelings on participating in some of these? And and so should we keep those 2 things separate, or keep it the way it is? Or
yeah, I think the question is a good one, and that is it does to a large extent tie together with SB2. I mean, what you and I discussed was the idea that we might be able to use the funds to direct towards some objective standards, towards revisions to the general plan, to tighten up objective standards, to smooth the processes within the city, so that it's SB2 qualified as we go forward with that. So I think with SB2, we do have a very distinct goal of trying to make sure that the funds are directed not simply to a building permit program software, which is great because it improves the city's workflow and it should fit with the SB2 grant, giving us back some money and things. But we do want to, I think we should continue as the SB2 to focus very specifically on whether we can use some of that money to make some operational improvements in the planning process. We've got a good example of a couple of recent planning issues that have come up for the city, both with subdivision and with the house on Greenwood. So I think using those examples, we can look to see whether SB2 grant money can be used. Operational excellence ties with that, but it's not directly the same thing. It really is your forte on operational excellence. To some extent, I like to see operational excellence continue with you. I don't know if someone else on the council can handle that more proactively than I have time to do. I can do the legal side of the SB2, but taking on all of operational excellence, I mean, it's a huge project. You do need some extra hands-on with that, I think.
I think Mr. Luthold Mr. Leonardis was suggesting that we also have a ad hoc committee for Good Neighbor. And so I think my question is, should we combine the Good Neighbor? Because, you know, we want to try to bring site and architecture and have a bit of committee input and community input into this process. And so should Good Neighbor be a separate initiative, or should we try to combine it with objective standards, since it does kind of touch on both, you know, those different stakeholder groups?
Yeah, I think those two are a good fit. I mean, and I would certainly be willing and able to launch into Good Neighbor with you. We could sit down and brainstorm and figure it out, and split up some workload on that, figure out what we need to do with staff and surveys or things like that. The fence has been an issue that's come up, site and architecture. We need to bring all of this together. We've talked about having site and architecture have a joint meeting with us. Maybe that's something we should do early on. So I'd be willing to get involved with that. If there's somebody else on council who wants to do that with you and spin off SB2, keeping it separate, I'm okay with that. Either direction is fine.
Yeah, I can go either way. It actually, it was Councilmember Turner was my buddy on Good Neighbor, so I don't want to cut you out. So I can work with two people. That's fine. We can get more work done that way.
Whatever's going to get the work done. So especially since SB2 is due to expire in December, perhaps it's best to have two separate and then meld them together if necessary. Does that make sense?
Okay, I mean, that way we're kind of divide and conquer, because one is, I think the Good Neighbor is much more actionable right this second, and the other one will take a little more work, and we don't really have a lot of cooked ideas for that one. So
okay.
Yeah, I'm fine to keep them separate, and I'm fine to participate on both of those. That's fine.
All right. So then, Mr. Leonardis, at this time, do we go ahead and direct staff to create these ad hocs, and then you'll come back with a resolution finalizing these?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if we need a resolution other than just direction from council to establish ad hocs. I think it's an effective way to, you know, become organized and have council participate in the workflow. And then that way, when it gets to the level when we adopt, you know, whether it be a climate action plan or something, that there was direct feedback from the council along the way, as opposed to staff creating it and then getting the council feedback. So I think these are all that, based on the discussion I heard, I look forward to establishing these new committees. But if we can just run through a quick list, it sounds like we have the CASA compact is going to stay the way it is. We have until, and we can just kind of make that one expire. It will be early December after the new mayor is elected, or we can have it expire. I think the important thing to take into consideration is also at the end of the year, these should be reviews. So this is also kind of a process change in the sense where we would do it at budget time and do it at the end of the year when the new mayor is appointed, so they can also change these out, especially during the election years. So it would be kind of a twice a year check-in as well. But getting back to the point here, the CASA compact, that one would be continued to essentially the end of the year, the way it is. The wildfire emergency preparedness, I don't know if council wants to continue with that, but you'd have to decide who would like to be on that as well.
But why don't you repurpose that one into climate action and just make it a superset?
That can be the climate action one.
Sure.
And Mayor Lawler, just to sort of supplement, that explanation, To form an ad hoc committee, you don't typically need a resolution, but you do need an affirmative vote, and you do need to designate who's going to serve on that committee and how long that committee is going to last. It seems the city has historically adopted resolutions in part because it's a good way of keeping track of when that was formed and how long it's in existence. But ultimately, the council does need to make a decision of who's going to be on what, and we need to have a vote one way or the other to form those ad hoc committees and designate the persons.
Okay, thank you. Well then, so Mr. Leonardis will continue going through the list, and then we'll determine the length. I mean, I like your recommendation of making it 6 months and revisiting it at the end of the year, especially with the change, the mayoral change, and then we can appoint folks, council members to each of these.
Okay. So wildfire, CASA, it sounds like social media will be left disbanded. Veterans Memorial, that one expired June 4th. Is that one coming back?
I think we need that if because we plan to do a memorial at combined with the ADA Center and so forth. And so I'm enthusiastic about that one also.
Okay. Customer orientation and operational excellence, that one will be coming back as well.
Yes.
And then we have page 2, the SB2 grant, that one will be coming back.
Yeah, well, that one continues to December anyways.
Yes.
But we could just make it go through the end of the year.
Okay. So I have a total of 5 so far. We had 6 previously.
And Good Neighbor. We want to add Good Neighbor also.
Okay. Now the question becomes, who gets to serve on all of these? And is that a discussion that we bring back later and fill in the boxes? And I would like to say, moving forward, I think it would be great, whoever serves on the ad hoc, at least to touch base once a month. So between now and December, have 5 or 6 meetings in reference to the topics and be able to work with staff and bring items forward over the course of the ad hoc discussions. So with all that said,
the question, Steve, is can you keep up? I don't think you've kept up your end of the bargain. So
I'm trying. Well, that's a good point. I mean, for instance, off the top of my head, things like the Good Neighbor resolution, already starting to work on some of that stuff. The CASA compact, obviously, there's a lot of laws and things that need to be reviewed, so that might be less frequent, or that's going to put a lot of the workload onto the council members who are bringing that forward. The Veterans Memorial is pretty straightforward. The customer service and operational excellence is a lot of processes and putting things into place. The climate action, if we add the 6th one, I think that can be something that can go relatively quickly and produce some results. So all of these have different, I guess where I'm coming from, I think a lot of them should kind of be standing committees. Some of them have a beginning and an end, and others should be, like wildfire and emergency preparedness should always be kind of a standing committee that should continue forward, I think. Things like customer service and operational excellence, that can probably continue forward. At some point, we'll run out of SB2 grant money. That one might disband, but the ones that are more task specific, like come up with a climate action plan, I think those are ones where we have it, or the Veterans Memorial have kind of a beginning and an end, and they'll eventually drop off. So all these thoughts combined, and who's going to serve on what, and how much activity there will be.
Mr. Leonardis, I will sort of point out that, while I do agree with you that some of these issues are likely to be ongoing for the city, such as, wildfire risk and operational, management, if the council does actually formally make standing committees for these, then each of those committees is considered its own Brown Act body. So the city would need to publish an agenda, and every single one of those meetings, even if the committee only has 2 people, would have to be open to the public. So that is one concern with forming them as standing committees that I think the council should be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think that's why we don't have any.
So if they were established 6 months at a time, and then they kept being renewed for a period of several years, it would still be considered a non-standing committee if the work were to continue over time and new members were appointed throughout the course.
My recommendation on that would be to specifically assign tasks to be done so that the committee could expire upon completion of the tasks. That way there's no question that it's not technically a standing committee.
Okay.
All right then. So then, Mr. Leonardis, should we just go down the list and ask people who are current council members if they want to remain on that or if they'd like to do something different?
I think that would be a great start.
Okay, so we'll start with just following the list that you provided, wildfire, emergency, and preparedness. We have Councilmember Turner and Councilmember Elahi. Do you both still want to remain on this, or?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great.
And I think we should also include pandemic in that one.
Absolutely. I guess emergency preparedness would include that. Yes.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Okay, then CASA Compact, also Councilmember Turner and Councilmember Elahi, would you like to both name?
Yeah, and I don't know if that should become our arena committee also, because I think that's what we're dealing with, is arena numbers and everything else that comes by.
So maybe the housing ad hoc committee.
Yeah, so it should probably change to the housing.
Rename it.
I don't think it should be called the CASA Compact anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
So we can retitle that.
The housing.
Yeah.
So we'll call it, what do we want to call it? Housing or arena?
Arena ad hoc.
Legislation.
Yeah, arena legislation is good.
I think the bigger problem is ADAG as well. Because ADAG.
So the housing legislation ad hoc, that covers it all.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so Councilmember Elahi and Councilmember Turner will be on that, or?
Yep, looks like you both. And then Veterans Memorial, we have Councilmember Elahi and Councilmember Labouvet. I assume you both want to maintain that.
Yeah, that's an important one, and maybe between Councilmember Labouvet and myself, we should try to see if we can raise some funds that will help us with the annexi development there also.
All right, and then the customer orientation and operational excellence is Councilmember Labouvet and Councilmember Turner. I'm assuming you both want to keep that.
Yes, please.
And then the SB2 ad hoc committee is Mayor Pro Tem Luthold and Councilmember LaBouvet. I'm assuming you guys will continue with that.
Yes.
Sounds good.
And then what's left is the Good Neighbor ad hoc and the Climate Action ad hoc. So at this time, Good Neighbor ad hoc committee, I mean, I know I would enjoy being on that. I'm not on any ad hocs right now. And Councilmember LaBouvet, I mean, I know that the neighbor policy is your baby, so I don't know if that's, I'd like to serve on that with you if possible.
It's perfect for me. Rowena, are you slighted by that in any way?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Rowena wanted to be on that. That's fine too. That's okay. Okay, I'm all about everyone getting along here. So.
Well,
if I'm stepping on your toes.
Mayor, I think it's also a good idea for people to work with people that they don't usually work with on committees sometimes as well, and try to look at the workload because Councilmember Elahi is on a lot, Councilmember LaBouvet is on a lot, Councilmember Turner is on a lot. So if Councilmember Turner wanted to, or Councilmember LaBouvet wanted to, step off of one of the committees and incorporate you or Mayor Pro Tem Luthold.
Okay,
that would be a suggestion.
Okay, duly noted. So we have the Good Neighbor. Moving on to the, I guess what's left is Climate Action.
Yeah, Liz, you and I could do that and take up and actually do some work here instead of Dan, Javed, and Rowena having to do everything.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good to me, if everyone's okay with that.
Okay, so I have the list. So on the Good Neighbor Mayor, that is, that will be Turner and LaBouvet? Or is that you and LaBouvet?
It's I think it's me and Labouvet.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so Liz, do you want to take veterans if you want to do fundraising? I'm probably not a great fundraiser.
I could do that.
Yeah, do you want to go beat the pavement? You're the mayor, right? So that might be a good one for you. I love that. I love that committee. I mean, I really want to support the veterans, but I wonder if I'm usually more of a behind the scenes guy.
Well, I can tell you what to do, but okay, yeah. If you think that
If you're looking for another committee, trying to balance it out, maybe we should take. I mean, maybe the mayor and the city manager can work on this list behind the scenes, make sure it's balanced.
Sure.
And we can do that. We could bring it back in August. This is just an idea tonight for discussion. I wanted to create, again, the work plan moving forward. And on the veterans memorial, assuming that everything works with the budget and the cost of the annex building next door, that is going to be part of that. And we now will have some architectural renderings we'll be able to show to people, and that will create some excitement. We'll say, okay, we have this project and there's a location potentially here or there, and could you get members of the community to go out and raise funds for the memorial, go out and hire artists or get somebody to create the renderings where the memorial could go. So that would be a fun one coming up. So it wouldn't necessarily always be just raising money.
Okay, well, we can revisit that, I guess. Whatever works.
So what I will do, I think I hear consensus. We'll revise the list, and we'll Mayor Lawler and I will discuss the workloads. And we know, I think the only one in question at this point, if Councilmember Labouvet would like to go off veterans, and if Mayor Lawler would like to go on. So we will figure that one out behind the scenes, and we'll bring this back in August.
Flip a coin.
Okay, great. Okay, then you have direction.
Yes.
I don't think I need to open this for public comments. This is not a public comment item, but no one wants to speak anyway. So, all right, moving on. Before we adjourn, I just want to make sure, are there any other council members wishing to make any comments at this time before our next meeting in August? Councilmember Labouvet?
I'll make some comments. I want to kind of formally add some comments that I think Mayor Pro Tem Luthold started on some procedure. So I prepared some statements and had been trading some emails with our city attorney, but I wanted to just bring this more public and bring it forward and try to make some things actionable. So with regard to recent land use public hearings, there's a need to add some additional provisions to the Good Neighbor Site and Architecture Development Transparency Resolution passed on February 4th, 2020. So as a side note, that's 5 months that have passed and no components of this resolution have been implemented as directed. Let's please make this a priority. I acknowledge that California requirements add considerable but not unsolvable constraints to our policy discussions. They do not prevent us from refining our process and ordinances to achieve our policy goals. We need to develop policy that balances the rights of an applicant to modify a proposal and the rights of residents to be notified of a proposal in advance of a public hearing. I find it quite reasonable for a resident to want a 30-day notice to review final plans. With the expansion of duties of the Site and Architectural Commission that we recently passed, it's the city policy for site and architecture to provide a recommendation on land use proposals where they cannot directly act. I find it quite unreasonable to allow plan changes that would materially impact the site and architecture recommendation to the point where the city planner would contradict the site and architecture recommendation. Furthermore, I question if the city planner correctly followed the appeal process by allowing plan changes not reviewed by site and architecture, given that in the municipal code it states, the city council shall hear and consider only those issues which were presented to the commission, except for any new issues which could not have been known at the time of the commission hearing. So I don't interpret that as meaning plan changes. So I think plan changes should be a new application and go back through site and architecture. And we need to address that.
Since California requires as little as 60 days processing in some situations, it's up to the city planner to manage the application process such that timelines can be met. This may require scheduling timing of application complete status or calling special meetings to expedite decisions. It is not an excuse to shortcut adequate public disclosure. Item number 2 of Good Neighbor is to document the development flow and timelines so expectations are transparent for all. So that's why I put that in Good Neighbor, is that we need those timelines and we need those workflows to be documented so that everyone has a common understanding. Material plan changes reset the California timeline requirements. So for example, if an applicant brings new changes, it's clearly not the same application, and therefore the previous timelines basically expire. And so permit fees for resubmission and re-review of material plan changes should be rigorously enforced by the city manager to discourage last-minute updates and document applicant-driven reset of California timeline requirements. The city manager and the city attorney need to carefully review city planner recommendations so as not to put the city at risk of litigation. The city policy should be to err on the side of caution and notify an applicant 30 to 60 days after an application is complete of potential conflicts with Monte Sereno standards in advance of evaluation by the appropriate decision body. So I believe that the staff should be saying, hey, here's the kinds of things that might go wrong, not, hey, you're green lighting it. If the city planner is just going to green light stuff, then why should we have a site and architecture committee and a city council to make decisions? I don't feel it's the responsibility of one person in one department to make a single decision like that has so much weight. The city planner process seems to be exactly the opposite. I think we need to put some provisions in place to stop this from happening. So with majority agreement of the city council, I would like to direct staff to add the following items to the Good Neighbor Site and Architecture Development and Transparency implementation. The first item is final design plans must be made available 30 days prior to a public hearing notice. So basically I got this one out of the public testimony.
I might have to interject here, in part because if you're going to be providing substantive discussion on city policy and providing direction to staff, we really do need to agendize this for actual discussion as an agenda item.
That's not our customary. So Sergio, this is basically a future agenda item. So I would like this to be brought forward as a future agenda item.
Okay,
so I would like.
I misunderstood. Thank you.
Okay, so final design plans must be made publicly available 30 days prior to a public hearing notice. And then the second item is modify both the general case and the appeal process so that any development application, which only the city council may act, and the Site and Architectural Commission has provided a recommendation to the city council, and the applicant has made changes to the application, the Site and Architectural Commission will evaluate the changes and provide a recommendation to the city council. So those are 2 additional items that I would like you to add to future agenda items. If there's 2 other council members that agree with that and will allow that to move forward.
I absolutely agree with that. Councilmember Turner?
Yes, I would also like to add that I know, Mr. Lenardis, you're looking at implementing an online building permit system. And perhaps while we're doing that, we can look at the process for how we can improve some of these things when site and architecture looks at the design, how it goes from site and architecture and involves the planner as well as involving the city manager. I think one of the things that we had lacked in the past is really input and oversight from the city manager, and the city manager then goes to the city attorney when it is needed. So this way we don't get into a lot of back and forth at the last minute between city council and the planner and the applicant.
All right, thank you. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Leopold.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of maybe add a little addition to this because Councilmember Labouvé mentioned something earlier, but then he mentioned two very specific points. These 2 points may encompass this, but I did want to really point out the earlier item he mentioned, and maybe it deserves its own point, and that is to really make part of the procedure and the process the notification of the applicant in a timely manner within 30 days of all of the potential problems that they may have, because I think that's a very critical step that keeps us out of the objective standards only discussion that we've been talking about. And so we need to make sure that that is integrated in as we look forward here. So I would suggest that's either part of number 2, or it might even be a separate sub item that we should consider. Again, we're only talking about bringing these forward as agenda discussion points, but I'd like to underline that one.
Yeah, I didn't add that specifically because it's actually part of Housing Accountability Act, so you're supposed to do it. It's part of California law, but I agree, we should memorialize it and make it part of our process. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Member Turner?
Yes, I think one of the things that I feel very uncomfortable with the process today and what we need to address in future agenda items is that when we're talking about the staff, we're talking really about a staff of 1. And that puts a lot of power into one voice, where we should actually look at that and maybe say, is this a red flag, rather than saying, yes, you know, we will take whatever this one voice has. And we should look at it in terms of, do we have enough collaboration and checks and balances to the opinion of the planner and the city manager. And this way, when it gets to the city council, we're not in the middle trying to negotiate between site and architecture and the applicant and the planner.
All right, thank you. Then I think we can all agree we'd like to see this on hopefully the next agenda if possible. That would be great. I think, Mr. Leonardis, you have direction.
Yes, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for your comments. And, you know, there are great opportunities for process improvements in the planning area, I believe, as well as our coordination with the Site and Architecture Committee. And we look very forward to that joint meeting. I'm going to try to set that up in August. That was part of our strategic goals, as well as the review of our planning processes, which we have underway. So we look forward to sometime in August or maybe September bringing back the results of these items, as well as setting up the joint meeting with the Site and Architecture Committee and the Council, because again, I think a lot of it is just process improvement, checks and balances, and I think there could be policy written, of course, to direct process, but there can also be standards, you know, increased standards put in place, as was mentioned earlier by Mayor Pro Tem Leuthold. So we'll look forward to a combination of things and getting these underway. And I look forward to the ad hoc committees that will be helping on these items as well.
Great, thank you. Well then, I think it's time. It's 10:02. I think we can now adjourn the special meeting of the Monte Sereno City Council for June 30th, 2020.
Thank you, goodbye.
Thank you, good night. Happy 4th of July, everyone. Stay safe.
Happy 4th.